We're going to go live to Alberta Premier Rachel Notley.
Serious situation. I'm here before you to tell you how we are defending you, your resources, your jobs, and the future of our province and our country. For generations, Alberta has been forced to sell our resources to one customer, the United States, and to sell those resources at a major discount. The oil and gas in our ground is owned by each and every Albertan. When we're forced to sell those resources for less than they are worth, the whole country pays a price. Fewer jobs, overstressed hospitals, crowded classrooms. And for almost as long, successive governments in Ottawa and Edmonton failed to change this. Despite having more coastline than any country on the planet, Canada as a whole remains landlocked. 3 years ago, we set out to fix this. Working together, we've made progress. Today, Canadians in every part of the country support our efforts to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline. In coffee shops, on shop floors, and in boardrooms around the country, I've heard directly from thousands upon thousands of our fellow citizens who understand that a strong Alberta equals a strong Canada, and that a pipeline to the coast is critical to that. I want to thank Canadians for their support. Now, more than ever, we need to come together and prove to ourselves and to the world that our country works. Why? Well, because this morning, the Federal Court of Appeal ruled against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, quashing the decision to approve the pipeline. This ruling is bad for working families, and it is bad for the security of our country, the economic security of our country. Albertans are angry. I am angry. Alberta has done everything right, and we've been let down. The combined result of the actions taken by the Harper government, the current federal government, the National Energy Board, and the Federal Court of Appeal means that the current state of affairs in Canada right now is such that building a pipeline to Tidewater is practically impossible. As a result, our ability to transport our most profitable commodity is subject to the whims of the White House and the U.S. government. Let's not kid ourselves. This is a threat to Canadian sovereignty and Canadian economic security. It is a crisis. Today, Alberta and Canada needs action. I've always said that protecting our environment and growing our economy can and absolutely must go hand in hand. That's why in Alberta we established our Made in Alberta climate plan that creates jobs, lowers emissions, and sets our economy on a stronger, more diversified foundation. Yet as important as climate action is to our province's future, I've also always said that taking the next step and signing on to the federal climate plan can't happen without the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And so, today, I'm announcing that with the Trans Mountain halted and the work on it halted, until the federal government gets its act together, Alberta is pulling out of the federal climate plan. And let's be clear, without Alberta, that plan isn't worth the paper it's written on. Now, I don't take this decision lightly. Every Canadian has a stake in proper climate action, no one more so than my kids, than your kids, than the generations who will follow us. But Alberta, and indeed Canada, cannot transition to a lower carbon economy. We can't build a more just, equal, and prosperous society. We can't do these things if we can't provide the jobs and the prosperity that comes from getting fair value for the resources that we own. So, to Ottawa, tonight, I also say this. Successive federal governments created the mess we find ourselves in. It was broken in Ottawa, and now Ottawa needs to fix it. When Alberta's economy is held hostage, Canada is not working. So the time for Canadian niceties is over. Earlier today, I spoke to the Prime Minister, and I told him that Ottawa needs to take the following actions. First, and most obviously, the federal government must immediately launch an appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. But even more importantly, Ottawa must immediately recall an emergency session of Parliament to assert its authority and fix the NEB process as it relates to this project to make it clear that marine matters have been and will be dealt with in a different forum. Then, Ottawa needs to roll up its sleeves and continue its work to protect our coast. And finally, it must improve the consultation and accommodation relating to Indigenous people in the way that they deserve. Our sovereignty and our economic security depend on it. If the federal government acts boldly and gives this crisis the attention it deserves, construction can restart early in the new year. This absolutely needs to happen. Because today's decision by the court should put fear in the heart of any government or any investor who wants to export non-renewable resources directly from Canada, including, I might say, LNG on the West Coast. We cannot accept, no one in Canada should accept, that the only way to sell Canada's resources is through the US. No other country on earth would accept this, and Canada shouldn't either, especially when we are doing it to ourselves. It is ridiculous. Money that should be going to Canadian schools and hospitals is going to American yachts and private jets. We're exporting jobs. We're exporting opportunity, and we are letting other countries control our economic destiny. We can't stand for it. So that's why, for now, we are pulling out of the National Climate Plan. And I am calling on the federal government, again, to take this to the Supreme Court, to call an emergency session of Parliament, to fix this mess, and to get construction restarted. Alberta, we are the engine of this country economically. We have built one of the greatest societies on earth through hard work, through ingenuity, and by aggressively defending our interests when those interests have been challenged. History calls on us to do so again today. And you have my commitment. We will not back down. So thank you.
And we'll now take 10 minutes of questions before we wrap up.
You said you talked to the Prime Minister, given these conditions, including recalling Parliament. What did he say to you about them?
He indicated generally that they are very committed to getting the pipeline built, that their resolve has not faltered. In terms of the specific suggestions that we made, they were still in the mode of saying we need to examine the whole decision and figure out the best solution. This is what we think needs to happen.
You said, as a fault, you said to be withdrawing from the National Climate Plan. What does that look like? What would you actually be doing differently now than you were doing yesterday?
Well, you're quite right that the impact of our participation in the national plan comes into effect when the price goes up to $40. So right now, there wouldn't be an immediate impact, but it comes down to our government's role in terms of promoting the plan overall and their ability to count on us to be part of it.
What does this mean, Premier, to Alberta's carbon tax?
Our carbon tax as it sits right now, the Alberta Climate Leadership Plan stays in place. That was the Climate Leadership Plan was something we put in place before the federal government was elected, before we got into the conversation about Kinder Morgan or the Trans Mountain. But we've always been very clear that signing on to the Pan-Canadian Framework or the federal government's plan was conditional on the pipeline.
Now, what do you say to people who thought that they were going to get a pipeline by paying the carbon tax?
Well, what I say is that, getting this pipeline built is fundamentally important. And it is because it will create jobs and it will create a framework for long-term economic prosperity, not only here in Alberta, but also in Canada. And although we have a barrier in place right now, it is my view that barriers are meant to be broken or gotten around or walked over. And that is what we are focused on doing right now. We've always said to people that our climate leadership plan is part of an overall process, but we also have an obligation to make progress in Alberta, and that's what we're going to do.
You said that the timeline. Sorry, you said that the pipeline could start construction again in the new year. Where are you getting that timeline from?
Well, I mean, I'm not a legal expert on this, but in essence, if the Parliament were to deal with one of the two primary concerns that were articulated by the federal court, which is the construction of the NEB as was set up by the Harper government, if they were to legislatively address that issue, then what would remain would be the additional consultation and accommodation that was laid out by the federal court that needed to be done to meet the rights of Indigenous people. And that might well be capable of being adequately and effectively completed early in the new year. It might not be, but it might be.
Is that something you've heard from Kinder Morgan? Sorry, just a quick follow-up. Did Kinder Morgan give you an idea of
No,
the timeline?
no,
Okay.
no.
Dean?
What went wrong, Premier? Were the I's not dotted by the feds? Did the courts move the goalposts? What went wrong?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I can't give opinion on the particular legal decision, but certainly everyone's read it. But essentially, there's two things. I mean, the NEB process itself, the court decided they didn't like it even before it got to being the consultation process that was done by the federal government. So the NEB process, they decided they don't like. So that's the first piece. And the second piece was the post-certificate consultation that was done over of several months in 2016. They actually said was not bad, that the current federal government improved on the process, that the plan they had in place was a good one, that there were many good improvements, but it wasn't there yet. However, that part of it is, in my view, capable of being fixed, that there's still the ability to fix that. It's a delay, but it's not a fatal delay. The first piece is the NEB. And so now what we need to have happen is we need to have the federal government go back into the House of Commons and fix the mistake that was made by the previous federal government when they set it up.
And we're going down a hypothetical road, but if they don't do what you want and you pull out of this climate plan, it will be opposed on you, right? So are you going to go down the path of taking the government to court, a la Jason Kenney?
I think that there are a number of different tools that we would have to deal with that issue at that point, but that's a bit further down the road.
The price isn't supposed to go up to 40 for another couple of years
Yes.
yet. How is this an immediate threat to the federal government if it's we're going to pull out of this plan that takes effect 2 or 3 years from now?
I think, you know, that what it does is it makes it very clear that we have been a very strong ally, and we have been in a number of different forums in a number of different ways working with them. And they know that come 2 years from now, they're losing another ally if this isn't fixed. So it's not an immediate consequence right now, for sure, because Alberta is ahead of the rest of the most parts of the rest of the country on it. But I think that it sends a very strong message, and I think it will have an impact.
You can forgive Albertans to think that they're paying $30 right now, and they were told that look, this carbon pricing is going to get the social license to get this pipeline built, and pulling out 2 years from now, you can forgive them for thinking, well, that's not strong enough.
Well, no, I as I said, what we always said was signing on to the federal plan was linked with the pipeline. So that was the way we approached it. Very early on, when we got elected, we also said that we were going to try to make up some of the lost ground from decades of failure by the previous Conservative government here in Alberta to do anything on the matter of climate change. We had no climate change plan in Alberta. We had no energy efficiency in Alberta. We had no plan to improve renewable energy. We had no plan to diversify our energy sources. We had none of that. So that was stuff that we always knew we were going to do. But the signing on to the growth of it through the federal climate plan, that is a thing that we are not prepared to do or to go any further down that road until we get this matter fixed.
Guys, we just have time for one more question. I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards. Dean, go ahead.
I mean, you just passed a law to cut off oil in both directions. If you're trying to make your point, do I not do that?
Well, you know, as things stand now, we're going to see how things unfold over the next little while, and we look at the degree of attention that this receives from the federal government and the legislative and other plans that the federal government is prepared to apply to get this thing rolling. The current state of things is that the delay is not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. We're going to see what we're going to do, Dean, is we're going to watch how things unfold.
Thanks, everyone.
We have a bill. It's there. Thank you, everyone.
That was Alberta Premier Rachel Notley saying Albertans are angry. This is a crisis, and Alberta is pulling out of the federal climate plan.